You can sit here.
Oh, and then you can hold for hours.
Can I sit by you?
Well, you just think you're going through something, so I was hungry.
I'm gonna get some lemonade.
Tell me about your necklace. I noticed it when you came on. Wait, could think of both That's like before my daughter and then
I have to help up that donut.
yeah, well, but I was sad that it didn't, that made my daughter happy. He voluntarily coached the girls basketball. Yeah, for a while. I was telling you, we started dating.
Why did that
Yeah, yes, I remember Pastor My kids have that. Like sideways, like
It's like flavor. It's like flavor. I have this like flavor at my house. So it's like packets and there's like a strawberry and a lemonade. Strawberry is like a strawberry. And if you put that in,
Welcome everybody. It's a joy to have you joining us here today for our 160th anniversary celebration of the Freedom Moravian Church. So thank you for being a part of it. The actual anniversary of our congregation is December 22nd, but we didn't want to get too crowded with Christmas, so we thought it would be better to have the celebration as part of our summer festivities with our annual picnic. If you're interested in learning more about the history of our local congregation, inside of the narthex here, either from this door or if you go around to the ramp and go in the front, there are some books on the inside there that's from our 150th anniversary. So it's missed in the last decade, but it does give a lot of insight to it. So yeah, Sherry's got a copy there to kind of see through it. So special thanks to Sherry, who put a lot of work into making this happen today, and all of our actors and all of the folks working behind the scene. It was a really big group effort to put it all together. There'll be some more goodies if your stomach isn't full enough already, but we'll wait till intermission for those. But we'll have a few speakers coming to the podium here doing their talk. We'll have one speaker down below here, and then there'll be a short intermission in between as well, and that's when the kids will help hand out some of the goodies for us all as well. Did I miss anything?
Mama, come sit by me.
We're going to begin.
Hello. My name is Frederick Naumann. I was born in Sitzroda, which is a province of Saxony, Germany, on the 4th of January in 1836. In 1855, at the age of 19, I came to the United States with my 7 siblings and my parents, Johann and Johanna, to East Troy, Wisconsin. In Germany, my father was a cooper. That is a person who makes wooden casks, tubs, and barrels. Once in Wisconsin, we became a farmer. Just after the Civil War began, my brother Moritz and I enlisted to join the Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry on the 16th of September of 1861. We were privates with the Company E of the 9th Infantry, and we did garrison duty in Missouri and Kansas. We would then conduct anti-guerrilla scouts and pursue rebel forces like the Quantrells bushwhackers. I spent my time at Fort Scott in Kansas in 1862. This was a German regiment, and its members included a large number of veterans of the German army. We were sent on hard, disheartening campaigns among scattering bands of guerrillas and Indians. We suffered great lack of things needed for a good life, like food, water, and safety. We would also be in small engagements. We took part in an engagement at Newtonia, Missouri, against a superior force. It was there that I rescued a wounded comrade, and therefore I was cited for heroic actions. At that same battle, my brother Moritz was briefly taken prisoner. Later in the war, while on duty near Little Rock, Arkansas, in October of 1864, I incurred a rupture on my right side, caused by falling over a ditch while on picket duty at nighttime. I also contracted deafness in one ear, exposure for taking cold. The gunfire probably didn't help either. I received a disability pension of $15 a month for the conditions that I had. On the 26th of November, 1864, I was mustered out in Milwaukee and returned to Walworth County. On the 15th of March of 1866, I married Justina Brock in Spring Prairie, Wisconsin. She was the daughter of Carl and Christina Brock. They came from Brandenburg, Germany around 1860. We moved to Black Creek with our two small boys, Morris and John, in 1868. Justina's parents and sisters also moved to Outagamie County, where we were all farmers. Justina and I would become parents to 10 more children. On the 11th, along with life comes this disheartening. And on the 11th of January, 1879, we had triplets, 2 boys and a girl. But the girl would pass away during birth. One of the other triplets, Martin, died on the 31st of March that same year. Both children were buried on our farm, but later they were moved to the Freedom Moravian Cemetery. Then on the 21st of May, 1882, we were blessed with twins, August and Frederick. However, August died on the 11th of September at just 4 months old. Our son John, in 1893, at the age of 25, died when he fell from a runaway horse. 2 years later, my wife Justina would die on the 22nd of November of 1895, at the age of 49. They are all buried at the Freedom Moravian Cemetery. And I would live out my remaining years, first living with my son William in Black Creek. Then in 1905, I lived in the Veterans Home in Milwaukee, and I passed away on the 4th of April of 1911. Although my family is all buried at the Freedom Moravian Cemetery, I was buried in the Wood National Military Cemetery down in Milwaukee. So enough about me. Did you know that due to the Union blockade, that the Confederate surgeon faced a severe shortage of silk for stitching wounds? A surgeon named Hunter McGuire began boiling horsehair as a substitute. He noticed his patients had significantly had fewer infections, completely unaware that he had just discovered a highly effective sterilization process. And did you know that one lucky homeowner, his name was Wilmer McLean, he moved his family from Manassas, Virginia, to get away from the war because the first battle was in his on his farm. And so he moved away, and then later in the end of the war, Confederate General Robert E. Lee would formally surrender at his parlor in his home. Unknown to many people, Freedom Moravian may never have been even established if it wasn't for the Civil War. In the 1850s, German immigrants had been busy settling in the land in this area, which became known as the Mecklenburg Settlement, named after the area in Germany from which these folks migrated. They had been working hard building their homes and barns, as well as clearing the forested land for farming. But something very basic was missing in their lives: a Christian church which could anchor them in their religious beliefs. But their prayers would soon be answered in a rather unusual way. The year was 1864, and President Lincoln issued his last draft for the Civil War soldiers. Men from the towns of Center and Freedom answered the call and traveled to Green Bay to sign up. Because they traveled by foot and horseback, it would take a long time for them to reach the cities. So after carrying out their obligations, they needed to stay overnight before heading back home. Because it was Sunday, the men casually drifted into a Moravian church, where they were surprised to hear a pastor speaking in their native tongue, German. That pastor was Reverend Gottlieb Icke. He just so happened that a Freedom Township resident was at that very church. His name was Fred Wolf, and he ended up heading a committee of men who had answered the draft and urged Pastor Icke to hold services in their homes. In the summer of 1864, Reverend Icke made his first trip to Freedom Township by traveling first by train to Appleton, then 6 miles on foot, and then taken further north by a team of oxen to the residence of Christoph Mueller. There he preached his first sermon to the Freedom people. He repeated his pilgrimage many times in the next 2 years, until finally on December 22nd, 1866, in the home of Frederick Stammer, the Freedom Moravian congregation was organized. Pastor Icke became the full-time pastor at Freedom Moravian in 1867, serving until the fall of 1875. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the other Civil War veterans who lie in the Freedom Moravian Cemetery. They are Adam Krabbe, John Moss, Edwin Nye, Julius Baum, Joseph Hager, William Dewell, James Gardner. We owe them all the great debt of gratitude for their service to our country. May they all rest in peace. I would salute any soldier that is in service now and any that has passed on. Thank you for your time.
Can everybody hear me? I think you can. First of all, Norm did a great job. Can we give him a round of applause? So my name is Roy Walter Sprister. Some of you may know my grandson Rob, who is a member here. He's a good-looking guy. He's about my height. Looks a lot like me, actually. But anyways, back to my story. I was born May 28th, 1920 to Paul and Sarah Sprister. Our dairy farm was a few miles south of here in what today is known as Grand Chute. And I am the fifth in a family of 8 children. In 1934, I was the valedictorian of the 8th grade at St. Paul's Lutheran School in Appleton. And I enjoyed school, but sadly, this was the end of my schooling, as this was during the Depression and I was needed at home on the farm. I worked on a couple other local farms until in 1937 I was lucky to find work at Coles Brothers in Appleton. Now, Coles Brothers manufactured silo blowers. Maybe some of you farmers in the crowd here maybe had a Coles blower at one time to fill your silo or fill your barn full of straw. Coles Brothers became Fox Brady and later on Fox Tractor. After work, I like to go out, and in 1939 at a dance hall in Neenah, which was called The Beach, I asked a pretty girl named Margie Searing to dance. And to my surprise, she said yes. I would see Margie almost every day from then on. We would go to dances at local establishments, movies. Sometimes she would come and watch me at my softball games, or she would come to watch me bowl. And in 1941, my 5-man bowling team won the Appleton Bowling Championship. One day, I lied to my boss at Coles Brothers and said I had a dentist appointment. But what really happened, Margie and I went to buy an engagement ring. And then on a Thursday night, July 28th, 1941, we got married at St. Paul's Church. We had $28 to our name. And we spent our wedding night in an upstairs bedroom at Margie's parents' home. Okay, glad you got a laugh out of that. Now, the $100 a month I was making at Cool's Brothers wasn't great, but we were able to find an apartment for the two of us. On Sundays, we always made time for church and would usually go for a drive in my 27 Chevy Coupe. And I think it was around April of 1942, we found out we were expecting our first child. We were excited, and on November 14th, 1942, our son Ronnie was born. Now, later in life, Ronnie would go on to marry Donna Minster, who was the daughter of John and Dolores Minster, who many of you probably knew. They lived on the farm next door to the parsonage. Now, sadly, the farm was tore down in 1998, but if you look behind you, and the people on that side of the crowd can probably see it, the farmhouse is still there today, built in 1848. So at this time, I'm going to give the microphone over to an older version of Roy, and this statement is true in more ways than one.
You look familiar. How about that chow in there? That was good today. It sure beat the shit on the shingle we usually got in the mess hall. Before I get started, when I was in the Army for 2 years, I wrote 500 letters home during that entire 2-year time. And they're all in this bin right here. This is about a month and a half's worth. And since we have a lot of time, I'm going to read all 500 to you tonight. So I left the train station and said goodbye to Ronnie and Margie on December 7th, 1942, which was exactly 1 year to the day that Pearl Harbor got bombed. And those 500 letters that I told you about, they've all been reproduced, and they are on file at the Freedom Historical Society, open for the public to see at any time. I became a member of the 101st Airborne Division, which is probably about the most decorated Army division in Europe in World War II. If you've seen the miniseries Band of Brothers, that was part of the 101st Airborne. They were the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and I was a part of the 401st Infantry Glider Infantry Unit. So the 506, they jumped out of planes. We crashed into the land on a glider. We thought they were nuts. They thought we were nuts. So after I said goodbye to Ronnie and Margie, I was sent to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, which was an assembly point, at which time the Army would need new men for new units, and they would be the supply area. And I'll just read you about my first day there. How are you, honey? This was about a week into the Army. How are you, honey? I imagine you're kind of worried, seeing I didn't write since last Wednesday. Well, I'll tell you about it. Thursday morning we got up, had chow. From chow we went and mailed our clothes in that letter you got Thursday. Then we went and got our hair cut. The cost was 35 cents. When we got back, we went to clean the barracks, and at about 10 o'clock the corporal came up and said, a new shipment order, 495. Sprister, Rofke, get into your olive drabs and get over to the orderly room. When we got there, we waited around till 11 o'clock before we went to chow. From there, we came back to our barracks. I asked the captain what time we were going to have clothes inspection. He said he thought it would be about 2 o'clock. Irvy and I went over to the PX to get a small bag to keep our shaving equipment and our knife, fork, and spoon. We just had it when a runner came over and told us to be back to the orderly room at bag and baggage in 2 minutes. That meant we had to stuff our stuff in about 2 minutes. I don't know if I told you about our barracks bags or not. They're canvas bags about as large as a good-sized grain bag, and all our clothes except the ones we wear go in them. We made it all right and went for an inspection. From there we went for short arm, which was a medical exam. Then we got split up. Finally, we were put on a train and left the fort about 4 o'clock. We went to Chicago from there, then to East Illinois. A bearing burnt out in a wheel, and we were there all night replacing it. I'll skip all the little details, but we went through Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, part of South Carolina, and ended up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. On the train ride, I rode with Bill Myrick. He's from Milwaukee. We had a good time all the way. 2 kids from Kaukauna and Appleton rode ahead of us. The 4 of us played cards some of the time. When we passed through the small towns, all the people stood on the sides and waved. Some of the older ladies threw kisses. Most likely they had sons in the service. There were a lot of tunnels we went through. Most of them were short ones. When we left Fort Sheridan, no one except the lieutenant and corporals knew where or when we were going. We had a regular troop train. There were over 300 of us. We took our own cooks along, and they had a car with a big stoves to cook on. The grub was real good on the trip. We were supposed to have Pullman cars. They couldn't get any, however, so we had to sleep in our seats. Friday night, Bill and I stood guard in the cooking cars for 2 hours. All we had to do was keep everyone out and keep the fire going. That was better than trying to sleep anyway. There was a lot of pretty scenery in Tennessee and South Carolina. We went around the Big Smoky Mountains. We pulled in here about 1 o'clock this morning. They had army trucks waiting to take us to our barracks. We still had to go and get our blankets. It was about 2 o'clock before we got to bed. So our training at Fort Bragg after basic training was the same training that the paratroopers took. The difference was the paratroopers all volunteered for their duties. We were conscripted in, and the paratroops kind of looked down at us. They didn't think we were the real airborne. But we did the same training. We did the push-ups, the sit-ups, the obstacle course. We had to carry a man on our shoulders 80 yards, and we had 20 to 30 seconds to do it. 3 to 4 times a week for 3 months, we would march 20 or 30 miles a day. We would march to the halfway point. We would dig our foxholes, which would take a couple hours. We'd do a little bit of training, and then we would head back home. Our barracks life, if we weren't on an overnight operation, we would be start at 6 and usually end the day at 6 p.m. From there, we'd eat chow, and we'd have time to clean our weapons and clothing. We'd have free time. I usually rode home every night to Margie. Sometimes I'd also read or play pinochle. Lights were out at, and when lights were out at 9:30, but some men were always playing poker or craps till 3 in the morning. They would sneak into the latrine to play because there were lights there. I didn't go out much. I might see an occasional movie. I had pictures from home hanging from my bunk, and one day one of the soldiers came by and he kept looking at the pictures, and he kept looking at Marge on the pictures, and she said, "No wonder you don't go out with a woman that looks like that." At Fort Bragg, when I'd ride home to Margie, I'd talk about our good times. I'd ask about Ronnie, what was happening at home. I'd talk about our dreams. Our dreams were to own a dairy farm somewhere in the Greenville or Neenah area. I'd talk about the dances we used to go to. We always liked the big band music, the swing music, or the polka music. Not that Beatles and Rolling Stones crap you people listen to now. In March, Margie came down and surprised me, and I ended up getting pulled from the field, and we had a 4-day pass together, and we stayed at a hotel, and I just took her wherever I could on the base that we were allowed to go. After Marge left, I received our glider training. The gliders weighed about 4,000 pounds. They were flimsy. They were made out of 2x4s and aluminum framing. And we learned how to tie our equipment down and how to place it in the right spot so the glider could fly correctly. A load in a glider would carry 15 men, or else it would carry a few men in a jeep, or else it would be a few men in an artillery piece. The first flight in training that I ever took on a glider, the pilot was the actor Jackie Coogan, or as you know him, as Uncle Fester from the Addams Family. Pay in the Army was, we got $50 a month. When I rose in rank to private first class, I got a $4 raise. Later in the war, when I became a sergeant, that was a $10 raise. I got a $5 extra pay for being overseas and $10 in combat pay. Once we had invaded France, we were approved for another $25 raise. In this time, Margie had moved and Ronnie had moved back to Ma and Pa Searing's house, and Margie got a job at the Zwicker knitting mills in Appleton, where she would make gloves on the basement sewing machines, and some of those gloves got sent back to me. In late June, after 6 months, I finally got a 15-day furlough to go back home, and it was a surprise trip, and Margie and Ronnie were certainly surprised to see me, but we had a great time. It was a 3-day train trip, one way, so 6 out of those 15 days I was traveling. When I got back to Fort Bragg, the entire division of 15,000 men were packing up to go home, or to go to New York City. And from New York City, our 15,000 men were split up into 2 groups, and we went on 2 troop transports out of New York City for England. It was supposed to be about a 7 or 8 day trip. Shortly after we took off, our ship had a bunch of major problems. It was an old Norwegian rust bucket, so we had to pull into a port in Canada while they fixed it. Well, they fixed it, and when it went back out, it got about 20 miles, and it had already taken 1.5 feet of water on it, so we turned back. Went back to our port, and we waited and waited until the next troop transport came. Finally it came, and we finally went to England. It was a 8-day trip that ended up taking 6 weeks. The conditions were cramped, the bunks were stacked 5 high, it stunk, a lot of tempers were on edge on that trip. We finally got back to, we finally arrived in England, and we received donuts from the donut ladies when we reached the dock, which you'll hear more about later. Our 1,700-man glider infantry regiment was placed at Brock Barracks, which was 75 miles west of London. It was a 2-story brick building for our unit. We had a wood or a coal stove on each floor. We had straw-filled mattresses for our bunks, and you boiled your uniform on the stove to wash them, and you hung them on the clotheslines around the stove to dry them. I couldn't write much about what was happening in England because our letters were censored. We couldn't say where we were or much of our duties. And at Fort Bragg, it would take 4 days to send a letter home to Appleton. And the postage was free if you wrote free on the corner of the envelope where the stamp went. In England, that free mail took 3 weeks to 2 months to get back home. But if you used the 6-cent airmail stamp, it would arrive back home in 8 to 10 days. The Army also provided a form which was called V-mail, which was the size of a postcard that you could send home. Finally, after all our training in England, D-Day came. And our regiment arrived in the 4th wave by boat at Utah Beach around 10 a.m. There weren't enough gliders for the entire division, so we didn't land in the middle of the night to confuse the Germans. By the time we got there, most of the beach was secure, except for an occasional blind artillery shell that the Germans would fire. We marched inland for about a mile, and then we dug in that night, and we waited to meet up with the rest of the 101st Airborne Division, which had landed behind Germany lines before the night before. We had hard fighting for about 10 days and finally captured the town of Carentan in France. And then we were placed on a high ridge line that was surrounded by thick woods. It was a very advantageous position, and the Germans left us alone for the next month. Then we were suddenly relieved, and we were marched back to the beach and took boats and ships back to England. In England, we regrouped and we got new men and replacements. We had landed in France with 15,000 men in the 101st, and we came back to England with 11,000 healthy men. I was promoted to sergeant. We prepared to jump into France 7 or 8 times, but each operation got canceled as the Allies had advanced past our drop zones. During that time in England, I wrote this to Margie. Darling, the good that will come from this war has already been accomplished in more ways than one. All the boys learned how much home really means to them, how lucky they were to have a home. We've learned to appreciate what we had. Then, too, lots of people learn that they can't get along without God. I've seen some boys pray that never prayed before. It's changed them, honey. Another thing certain people learned, they can't conquer the world when they go against God and all his laws. So you see, darling, there's always something good in everything that happens. If nothing else, people always learn a lesson. Sometimes, though, it's too late. So on September 17th, the 101st finally jumped into Holland with the U.S. 82nd and British 1st Airborne Divisions. And the goal was to capture 6 major bridges and finally be able to cross the Rhine, and it was hoped that by capturing that last bridge, we could rush through Germany and get to Berlin before Christmas and end the war. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The British couldn't get the last bridge. The British armored division that was supposed to come in to relieve us, they kept getting thwarted, and the operation failed. For the British, they jumped with 12,000 men and only 2,000 returned. I was in Holland for about 2 months. We had real hard fighting the first 3 months, or for the first 3 weeks. And then we dug into positions in the lowland areas, into foxholes, and the water level was, the water level was only 3 feet down below the ground, the water table. So it was wet and it was muddy, and by the time it was November, it was cold and rainy. Finally, around Thanksgiving, we were relieved and we were sent to Mormillon, France, which was about 100 miles behind the lines. And there we would regroup. We lost about 4,000 men in Holland in that 2 months. The camp at Mormillon was used by the Germans previously, and we cleaned out all of the stables, and we used those for our barracks. During that time, I even got to visit Paris with my best friend, Captain Robeson, who was the chaplain for the 401st Airborne. One night I wrote this to Margie about my combat experience. I promised last night to tell you some of my experiences in Holland. I took off from an airfield in a glider, can't say where or when, and landed in a meadow in Holland. When I first heard the anti-aircraft guns, I couldn't think for a minute what it was. Then looking out the windows, I saw the flak bursting all around us. Funny as it seems, I wasn't the least bit scared. Suddenly there was a loud crack and the ship shuddered for a second. Then it went smoothly again. At least the landing field came into view. It looked much different than what the map showed. The pilot circled once, dipped to lose altitude, leveled off, and we hit the field. It was too short and had a fence row stretched directly in front of us. I braced for the crash, but the pilot raised the nose and just cleared the fence and sat down on the other side. As I got out of the ship, there were sounds of mortar shells landing. They didn't sound too close, so I returned for a cart full of ammo that was tied in the glider. From there, I went to the assembly area. That's about all there was to the flight. One thing I don't have to worry about, that's because I never know for sure if I've killed any Jerrys or not. The mortar is used to knock out machine gun nests, automatic rifles, etc. If there's one firing someplace, we fire till we don't hear it anymore. That's all there is to it. Even if we don't hit them, it scares the hell out of them. Some stuff, huh? At one of the many different times, they started shooting mortars back at us. 3 of us were working on the gun when we heard a swish and a big explosion right behind us. I turned and saw a big geyser of smoke and dirt go up about 10 feet behind us. It's only a miracle none of us were hit. Honey, now you know our prayers are answered. There's much more, but I'll let that go till I come home. It will be much easier to tell you when I see you. I'd rather just tell you how much I love you. While we were in Camp Mormillon, the Germans launched a surprise major counterattack on December 16th with numerous infantry and armored divisions, advancing as far as 50 miles into our lines. This created a bulge, hence the name, the Battle of the Bulge. I had an inkling we were going to be called into action, and I wrote this in my final letter home. December 17th, 1944. Dearest sweetheart, how is my sweet wife and our own little swell little son tonight? Your husband and daddy is fine, only so lonesome for you. There were no letters today again, but I got 1 package each from your sister Rita and 1 from Ronnie. 3 cans of chicken from Rita. A fruitcake, can of pork and beans, and a jar of sweet pickles from Ronnie. Honey, you really did a sweet job of packing the pickles. You do much better than anyone I've seen. Finally, I ended the letter. Darling, it's been so long since I've seen you or heard your sweet voice telling me the things I long so much to hear. As each day goes creeping slowly by, I realize I love you more and miss you so much I can hardly stand it. Honey, it's hard to understand why this should happen to us. These 2 years of our life have passed and we can never reclaim them. We know everything will work out for the best. My love for you has grown deeper. I found out what love is, though I can't explain or define it. It's something that you feel all over, and it's really wonderful. You mean everything to me, darling. Please write and tell me if you feel the same way. Someday soon I hope to come back to you and prove everything I've written. I'll close now for tonight, my dear. Remember always I love you with all my heart forever and ever. No one or anything can or ever will change that. You will always have all my kisses too, dearest. Good night, Margie, darling. May God bless you both and keep you always just for me. Yours alone forever, your loving, faithful husband, Roy. So sure enough, after I wrote that letter, we were called into action to go to Bastogne, Belgium. We grabbed as many weapons and ammo as we could, which was minimal since when we arrived at Mormillon, we had to turn all our equipment in. Most of us didn't have winter coats or winter boots or winter hats. 2 days after the German offensive, we boarded trucks in the rain for the 80-mile bumpy ride to Bastogne. There was no room to sit. We stood the whole way through winding, muddy roads through the thick Belgian hilly forest. Bastogne was a city about the size of Shawano. The importance of it was, in the middle of this entire bulge, it contained 12 major crossroads, which were right smack dab in the middle of the German offensive. And by holding it, we could bottleneck the whole German supply chain line. It was foggy just about every day I was over there. And our American Air Forces were all grounded. And so we had no air support and we had no way of supplies coming in. We had what we had, and we took from the soldiers that were retreating and used their equipment too. We started the battle on the 18th of December with about a 6-mile perimeter all around the city of Bastogne. Our men fought hard and we slowly retreated. By Christmas Eve, my unit was on the front lines only about 2 miles in front southwest of Bastogne. The temperature had been about 0 for 3 or 4 days, and we had gotten about 6 inches of snow at that time. And fortunately, at one point, the fog lifted just enough so we could get more ammo and medical supplies and food in. On Christmas Eve, Colonel Allen told us to expect a big German attack around sunrise, with tanks followed by German troops. We were at less than half strength at this time. We had about 40 men, and we had 11 machine guns with interlocking lines of fire, and we were going to go up against 16 tanks and 200 soldiers. We were, however, on top of a small, rising, gentle sloping hill with clumps of woods every now and then. We were told that when we heard the tanks coming in the middle of the night, that we should all run for any of these woods and let the tanks pass through. And then when the tanks passed through, we were to run back to our foxholes and take our positions. We were told that the German troops would not be able to keep up with the tanks, and they were right. So we ran into the woods when the tanks took off through our line, and then we retook our positions when they got past us. During this time, another 6 inches of snow had fallen overnight. About a half hour after we took our foxholes, the German troops advanced behind us, or towards us, as daylight slowly emerged. The battle lasted until about 10 in the morning. About halfway through, I peeked over my foxhole to check on my men, and then I ducked back down. We were slowly winning. A couple minutes later, I peeked up out of my foxhole again and was shot dead with a bullet in my head. We ended up losing 8 men on Christmas morning. The Germans lost all 16 tanks as they were destroyed by 4 tank destroyers and artillery in town. We ended up killing about 175 German soldiers and captured around 50. The next day, Patton's tanks arrived, and we weren't encircled anymore. As for myself and quite a few other GIs that day, we were buried in the local Bastogne cemetery. In spring, we were reburied in an American serviceman cemetery. And finally, in 1947 or 1948, I was buried for the final time at what is now known as Luxembourg American Cemetery with about 72 other of my comrades. This is the same cemetery that General Patton is buried in. Every day at the cemetery at 4:45 p.m., taps are played, and the cemetery closes at 5 p.m. As for Margie, she was at work one morning, and she saw in the basement at Zwicker Knitting Mills, and she saw that posturing coming down the stairs. She knew that I had been killed. Margie ended up marrying Orville Weinberg in 1948, and they ended up raising Ronnie and 6 of their own children and 3 foster kids on their dairy farm on County Inn in Freedom. Ronnie always said Orville treated him just the same as all the other kids did. One day, Ron spotted Donna Minster in the front yard of the farm of John and Dolores Minster. He pulled into the driveway and asked her on a date. 3 years later, they were married and had 2 boys, Roy and Rob Sprister. Ron and Donna owned and operated a financial services center in Seymour and Freedom for many years.
that off? Okay. Hello, my name is Terry, and I'm a donut dolly. Much has been written over the years about wars and heroes, but often the role of the women have been forgotten or minimized. Perhaps we recall names like Florence Nightingale and remembered as the Lady with a Lamp, who attended the womb in the Crimean War and who sparked worldwide health care reform. Later, there was Cleta Barton, who, during the Civil War, rode deep into the active battlefields to dress wounds, cook for soldiers, and provide emotional comfort. Her immense bravery under enemy fire earned her the nickname Angel of the Battlefield. Her work to improve sanitary conditions and reduce death during disease in military camps and prisons is well documented and ultimately resulted in the formation of the American Red Cross in 1881. Although these women were justifiably recognized for their contributions, there were thousands of others that played critical roles in the military and civilian areas. In uniforms, they served as doctors, nurses, ambulance drivers, and relief workers, as well as espionage. On the home front, they worked in munition factories. Do you remember Rosie the Riveter, who inspired millions to build tanks, ships, airplanes, and on other areas of support? But little is known about the civilian women who served the war zones of World War I and World War II. These women who served the front lines of the army were from the Salvation Army. Their fight against the pain, suffering, and army horrors of war, they earned the nickname Donut Girls. Their Salvation Army commander was Evelyn Jean Booth, who offered assistance to General Pershing, who first declined them, but later accepted their assistance to women who were on the front line supporting our troops in various ways. These brave women crawled under shell fire to deliver coffee and donuts to the troops in the trenches at the time. They worked so close to the German line that they couldn't even whisper for the fear that they might be heard. Soon the word of their work spread, and the girls found themselves to be national heroines. The expression of their love and concern originated in the form of a humble donut which rose out of necessity. In France, after over a month of rain, supplies were almost exhausted. They only had lard, flour, sugar, canned milk remain. Two women came up with the idea of making donuts. They had no rolling pins or donut cutters, but they were not deterred. An empty wine bottle an empty wine bottle, a percolator was used to make the donut holes. You're never going to think coffee the same anymore either. And some even use artillery shells as rolling pins. The first donuts were cooked over a wood fire, several donuts at a time in a small fry pan, resulting in 150 donuts. If a fry pan wasn't available, it was said that an army helmet was used in its place. And if you ever tried to wear one of these or felt one of these, you would know that it would withstand a fire because it's very heavy. The first donuts were donuts and coffee were not the only thing that the women provided by the Donuts Girl. Their goal was to supply the basic needs and necessities that reminded soldiers of home. They set up camps near trenches where they would mend uniforms, write letters to homes for their wounded, and yes, make coffee and donuts. In World War II, the American Red Cross became involved with the Clubmobiles. These trucks would be outfitted with equipment for percolating coffee in frying a donut. They're also supplied with record players and a large stock of vinyls that had popular tunes of the day for homesick troops. Wherever the troops moved, the Donut Girls followed, putting them in harm's way along with our brave soldiers. These Donut Girls provide understanding, sympathy, and something even mothering to young men who were tested to their limits by the harsh reality of war. Their selfless service through World War I and World War II will long be remembered. We have made donuts reminiscent of those by the Donut Girls and would like to share with you. As you eat them, think about the women who risked their lives to provide some comfort to our American troops on the front line. So maybe I could have some volunteers here, and they're going to pass some donuts. And we have available Fanta Pop. And if you know that, Fanta Pop soda was originated during the war. So we'll be taking a brief intermission while you enjoy your donuts. And if you saw on Facebook, we're just covered with flowers, the modern day people were. So please enjoy your donuts at your seats. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We're going to be doing a little bit intermission, so if you need to get up and stretch a little bit, if you need to reposition your seat into the shade or into the sun, however you feel needed, feel free to do that and move around as needed. We're going to pass out some of these sheets too, as my friend was just sharing a little bit about the history of World War II and some of the items that we have in our everyday lives today that we don't necessarily know the origins for, such as M&Ms, instant coffee, Spam. I don't have any Spam today, sorry. We have some Fanta, we have Cheetos and Pringles, and and then also Minute Maid, the concentrated frozen, became really popular during the war. And this is also kind of the origins of TV dinners as they started to become part of it too. I don't have TV dinners, but we do have some of the little snacks that'll be coming around too if you're not already full enough or everything else. So feel free to stretch and relax for a few minutes.
Is that fall?
There's some little information about our donuts right here. How's your donuts doing? Pretty good? Donuts are good to eat. Okay. All right.
I don't know. I'm in charge of them.
Good job. It
kind of looks that way. Oh, well, thank you.
They've been doing pretty good.
Would you like a pamphlet about it?
Oh yeah, this one I'll definitely pull one of it.
You like grass?
I will. What would you like to know about us donut dollies? Thank you very much. You're welcome. Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
There you go. Enjoy. Thank you, Em. You're welcome. Yep. Yours. Okay. There you go. How about you guys? Don't care about us donut dollies? I didn't think so. Well, that's all right. You can eat our donuts with us.
I'll have to read up.
Yeah.
Very good.
They're letting you out, that's it, huh?
Yeah, they did that. They allowed us. The ones that were very
Yep, I'm coming. I'm doing this.
To the bathroom like we're at St. Paul's and Nina?
I'm selling my donuts.
Oh, that's he, yeah. So he, this is his church. Yeah, so we do our own thing. We got married 10 years ago, so we already established our churches. Oh, he came here with his dad. Time to get something wrapped. How about you? Okay. So what brought you here? Oh, okay. Oh, nice. Sherry is
Then we're gonna go home, but I know. Pretty sure you'll see breakfast tomorrow.
I was already okay. Okay. Did you know you were going to
Hey, something taken care of.
It's interesting. It is interesting. I haven't one of the story was very, you know, heartfelt. Neat that they have those lights.
I would. Oh, you got me.
You want one?
Yeah.
I will try this. I will send it. I don't know what
Yeah.
Karen, do you want me to open your soda?
I got all of it.
You want that, Aaron?
I don't care. You don't get any of that.
Do you want more than I gave her a water?
There's more up there.
You want
Hey,
water?
what about donuts?
Keep it.
a whole bunch more up here.
No, thank you.
Why don't you go set it on the table? Bye.
Did you guys want a soda? You're welcome. Yeah, Sherry, our audience is just a talking story.
Guten Tag. Frau Sherry asked me to speak to you today. I am Hans Müller from Hamburg, Deutschland. I was conscripted into the 1940 the Wehrmacht Deutsches Afrika Korps, 200th Motorized Infantry Regiment to support General Ramos' 5th Panzer Light Division. We arrived in Tripoli, February of '41, to rescue the Italians, of course. Perhaps I can tell you more another time about the battles that led to our surrender in Tunisia, May of '43. About a month in an English Tunisian prison camp, we boarded a ship and headed to New York City, USA. Our ship was filled with Afrika Korps men, Waffen SS, and early volunteers, and of course, us conscripted. Mississippi and Texas received the majority of us on this ship. I and at least 1,000 men were sent to Fort McCoy. Fort McCoy wasn't the military institution you know over there on the way to La Crosse. It was a CCC facility, Civilian Conservation Corps. It was vacated. The Depression was ending, and the men had gone to war, and there was now a labor shortage, not a lot of unemployed people anymore. This is where my story begins. Why prisoners of war here in Wisconsin? The U.S. had agreed with England that after November of '42, the U.S. would start taking prisoners from the European and Asian theater. And all total, in the years of the war, 5,000 Japanese, 51,000 Italians, 371,000 Germans, a few Koreans and other Russians and nationalities came to America as prisoners. Keeping these prisoners in Europe and Asia would not make much sense to the U.S. Army. They would have to import all the food, ship it in, have massive amount of soldiers guarding us in our homelands, and it would just be a huge task to build the places to keep us. So the Army, in their wisdom, decided to bring us here. After we were here, the Army realized that there was a shortage of working people here in the country, and the Geneva Convention allowed for us to work up to 8 hours a day. So the Army sent us to these various camps and started to put feelers out. Businesses, canneries, farmers, other factories could petition the Army for workers. The Army would pay us 10 cents an hour while collecting 50, 60 cents an hour. the money was given to us in script where we could use it in the Camp PX to buy, you know, tobacco, toiletries, reading materials, stationery to write home, things like this. The rest of the money was collected and given to the federal government. Wisconsin, I'm told, generated $3.3 million in revenue through the POWs here. The nation generated over $360 million to aid the war effort through our work. So here we are in Camp McCoy. We had about 5,000 Germans. All of the Japanese, the first 3,500 Japanese that were prisoners of war came to Wisconsin. You wonder why they didn't go to California or New York, too close to an ocean perhaps. They definitely had their challenges. As you know, not many Japanese surrendered. About 500 Koreans. We saw Japanese, as Germans, we saw Japanese as subhuman. They were very different. And they probably saw us the same way. So in Camp McCoy, these different groups were separated. We did not stay in the same camp areas together. We were kept separate. The Japanese refused to leave the camp to work. They felt it was against their credo. They felt that would help the enemy forces of America. And so they stayed in camps and they worked in the camps. They cooked, they cleaned, they sewed. They helped build the Camp McCoy buildings that they needed to build. But they did not go out to any remote sites like the ones on this beautiful map to work. Us Germans, we were okay leaving the camp. Wisconsin's not too much different, you know? Winters, summers, springs, falls. So, were there some troubles? Yes. Some tried to escape. Where are you going to go in Wisconsin, though? You know? Usually they got captured pretty quickly because the only thing we could wear was a T-shirt with PW on the back, which made us look a little different. The Japanese did escape, but they were more easily caught back then. I don't think there were too many Asian people in Wisconsin. But a lot of the escapees turned themselves in because they ran out of food and water. And there was food and water back at the camp. One of the challenges is, and you may not know this, but the Waffen SS, which Waffen is military for Army, SS is Schutzstaffel. They had the little lightning bolts on their lapel. And some of the early signers up in the Nazi army were very fanatical. And the U.S. Army would separate us from them because many times they would be in gangs and beat us up close to death because we didn't quite believe as they believed. So they didn't get to go out in remote camps either. They were kept at McCoy. So the sad thing also is that a number of Japanese tried to commit suicide and many succeeded. But I will tell you that of the just under 400,000 prisoners of war that the U.S. had here in the States, that the death rate through natural accidents, natural death, suicide, so forth, was lower than that than the whole U.S. Army's training program. So we were actually considered to be pretty safe here. My first remote detail was at Camp Beaver Dam, June of '44. We set up tent camp, and that's customary in all these camps, was to be tents. So the cook tent, you have your tent that you shared with your mates. We were set up the camp in the midway of the Dodge County Fairgrounds. Of course, they put fence around and they put lights up, and they start out with maybe 20 or 30 soldiers with guns around the perimeter, but within a month it might be only one soldier at each corner. So we would cut weeds out of oat and pea fields, and we worked for Stokely Food Plant, canning corn and peas. It was considered essential work because the crops would spoil, and food was an essential need for the whole country at the time. One of my favorite work camps was at Camp Hortonville, Dines Lake, arriving late June. Camp Hortonville was a tent city, again, with a little over 300 PWs. We worked at canneries in Clintonville, Shiocton, Seymour, Shawano, Winneconne, Bear Lake, and Manawa. So, as I told you, the Army collected a lot more money for our work than they paid us. But we only were allowed to work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. So at the cannery, we would work from 7 to 3, and then go back to our camp for lunch, or we'd work from 3 to 11 p.m. But while working there, I had an opportunity to be sent to the Melchert farm in Seymour. They would drive up in a big black car and ask the soldiers for one worker. So a couple of us had been to Melcherts, decided we wanted to do this, see? Because not only was it just you were alone, you weren't being watched by anybody with a gun, but Mr. Melchert spoke German, and you had meals at the kitchen table and you could talk. It felt like home. So it was a desired opportunity. And enjoyed many conversations. So a couple of us kind of kept an eye out for the black car. I was repatriated, and people think the war ended, spring of '45, but not for us. I was repatriated back to Europe in May of '46, the year after the war ended in Europe. I was lucky I got to travel through England. There I went through a reprogramming schooling, and I had to work 2 more years in England before I could be returned to Germany. My friend Warner, not so lucky. He went through France in his return. In France, they took away his, the Army would give us basically a check, but we would have to cash it in to the U.S. Army in Europe to get the money. The French took the check away and took away his valuables and made him work for 3 years with no pay before he could return home. So I have lots of stories in my head, so I'm going to ask, are there any questions? Yes?
How were you treated in the community?
Well, communities were all different. There were companies and there were farmers that asked the U.S. Army for our labor, but the community, maybe the sons of the community had been killed, and the community would just get up in arms and say, no way, or they were fearful. So there were communities that did not receive our labors. Then I'll use the example of Sturgeon Bay. Sturgeon Bay was one of the larger sub-camps because they had all those cherry farmers and apple farmers and things all the way up the county. And the people of Sturgeon Bay were against us being there. But they came around, but then there was rumors that letters going to their loved ones back in Europe fighting about how people were fraternizing with us. And then they sent letters back to Sturgeon Bay, and then all of a sudden there was an article in the newspaper, and things got kind of ugly. So the Army went to the newspaper and said, we need to print these truths about what's really going on, and it settled down. Army had a no fraternization rule, but as I already told you, I fraternized with the Melcher family, and this happened in Door County too, because you wouldn't stay at the camp in Sturgeon Bay, you'd go up and stay, with the Anschutz at their, cherry farm, Anschutz spoke German too, and we would stay in small cabins right there at their place. So, we might have one soldier with us. Sometimes he'd even give us the rifle to carry, but, it was different. So everywhere we went, it was different how people responded, depending on what information. It got difficult though up in Sturgeon Bay, I heard, because in 45, 50 men died in war in Sturgeon Bay, the city of Sturgeon Bay itself. And then the Sturgeon Bay community really is struggling having the PWs there, because constant reminder of what they had lost. So it was a mixed, it was hard on communities, but also helped communities and helped businesses and farmers get through the tough time. For us Germans that worked on remote sites, we didn't have problem, we did what we did. There were times, though, we did protest and strike in camps, and then the soldiers would say, no work, no eat. And, we learned, it's better to eat. So we would work. So, any other questions? Yes?
Do you remember the name of the Melchards you worked on before? The first name?
Let me go to one of my researches. I'll make a plug. Sherry gave this to me. It's Stalin, Wisconsin, Inside World War II, Prisoner of War Camps by Betty Crowley. It's a fascinating story. Betty was a social studies teacher up in Altoona. For you Freedomites who follow men's basketball, that's the Altoona Railroaders that we were way behind at halftime for the state championship. Anyways, when she told her kids they had German POWs up in Altoona, which is Eau Claire area, they didn't believe her. So she set about the task of actually documenting the prisoner of war camps here in Wisconsin. The sad thing is that all of the records that the Army keeps, and the Army is really phenomenal at keeping records of everything, were stored in a facility that had a fire. So a lot of the original documents were lost. And so she went about down to Fort Sheridan in Illinois. She went all over different places and visited communities where they were and gathered testimonials and as much data as she could to put this amazing book together. The other book, and those of you that were in 8th grade with me back in the day, we used to read the book My Summer of My German Shoulder by Betty Green, where it was about a young girl infatuated with a German POW named Anton. So now, the Melchards, let me get that. I apologize, we're taking a bit. They're actually in there. There's actually 2 entries. So Ralph Melchert was, I think, the son that one of these letters is from. And he doesn't say his name, Ray Melchert. Ray Melchert family. Does that sound familiar?
What was that again?
Ray Melchert.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So Ray had a son named Ralph, and he wrote an entry that was preserved. And then there was a Lois Melchert, also from the same family, and apparently that family, the Melchert family, became friends with one of the PWs, so much so that when the Berlin airlift took place, when the Russians had blockaded Berlin, they sent flour, sugar, coffee, soap, toothbrush, paste, and other items to this German family that helped them out. And later on, the Melchert daughters, Lois and Janet, went and visited them in Germany, and they went back and forth several times, and there was a relationship that was established. So you had something that was more extreme in relationship, and you had something that was, we don't want you here kind of an experience.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Hello. I am Mark John Pavlov. I was born in Milwaukee. I was born in Milwaukee on June 20th, 1947, to parents John and Ramona Sylvia Pavlov. My family of Polish heritage settled in the West Allis area. I attended Milwaukee Elementary and high schools, graduating in 1965. It was while I was in high school that I learned 2 very important skills. that would serve me well in the future, although I was unaware of it at the time. One was that I excelled in swimming. I competed with my high school swim team for all 4 years and also served as a lifeguard. The second was that I became interested in playing the guitar. I never took lessons, but was rather self-taught. I must have done all right because I played in a small band for a while. It might have been in my DNA as well, because my Uncle Al, whom I loved and admired, played the guitar and even willed me his when he passed. Following high school graduation, I enlisted in the Navy. As you recall, the United States was deeply mired in the Vietnam War, and it wasn't long before I was deployed to that area. I was part of a crew that flew missions over Vietnam. Although not a pilot, I was an electronics technician. One night we were taking part in a training exercise that involved a submarine detection mission. We flew out of our base over the East China Sea. It was a stormy night with the tides rising as our plane circled and dipped. Its wingtip caught the crest of a wave, causing it to drop from the sky. I described the incident as I remember it in a letter to my family. All of a sudden there was a loud roar, a blinding flash of light and intense heat. Then I felt myself tumbling for what seemed to be more than a minute. The next thing I knew, I was underwater. When I got to the top, all there was fire everywhere. I swam underwater, bleeding in shark-infested water until I reached an open stretch of water, and then I inflated my life vest. And then I heard a raft inflating. Somehow it had thrown itself clear of the explosion without being destroyed. One of the other crewmen was aboard the raft by the time I reached it. 2 others later made their way to it. There wasn't anything left of the plane. As I wondered about why a few of us survived, but 8 others didn't, I remembered that I wasn't wearing my seatbelt as I was directed to. And perhaps that is why I was thrown clear and dropped an estimated 600 feet through the sky. The plane had crashed and exploded when it reached the water, creating a gigantic ring of fire. The submarine that was called the Rock was part of our training exercise. It heard and felt our plane's impact as it hit the water and exploded. The submarine surfaced and immediately began a rescue mission. I was taken from the raft, secured in a basket, and transported to a nearby aircraft carrier. As I was being transferred to the deck of the carrier, I once again escaped tragedy as the basket in which I was secured began sliding and nearly was swept into the ocean yet again. Thank God I was caught before I went overboard. I was then taken to a military hospital where I was in recovery for 9 months. I suffered from multiple cuts, 2 broken ribs, and severe burns to my hands and arms. I was honorably discharged from the Navy on June 2nd, 1971. Although my physical wounds healed, I suffered from post-traumatic stress and experienced many bad dreams throughout the years. After my discharge, I returned home, married and had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Unfortunately, the marriage did not last and I was divorced. And sometime later, I reconnected with a girl at a wedding who I had known for most of my life on May 10th, 1982. That lovely lady, Sandy, became my wife. With her 3 sons and my 2 children, our lives were filled with much activity and new ventures. I worked for Wisconsin Bell Ameritech, and later Sandy and I moved to the Fox Valley area, buying a house on Sandstone Court, less than a mile from the Freedom Moravian Church. We'd often take walks that led us near the church and wondered what was a Moravian. We finally found the courage to step inside and check it out, and we were greeted by Pastor Dwayne Ulrich and began attending on a regular basis, eventually joining the church around the year 2000. About the same time, Christian contemporary music was gaining in popularity. I was instrumental in organizing a group called The Gathering, which offered this newer style of music once a month at the church. I played the guitar and sang, and soon our group expanded to over a dozen singers. For the next 10 years, The Gathering flourished, but I began to experience my own health issues. While on an ice fishing trip up north, I suffered a heart attack, which resulted in heart surgery in Minneapolis. I did enjoy a full recovery from that incident, but later I developed cancer, from which there was not to be a recovery. I passed away on August 7th, 2010. My funeral was right here at the Freedom Moravian Church on August 12th, and another service was held in Milwaukee. I hope I'll be remembered as someone who shared their talents with others and someone who enjoyed a good life. This is Pastor Greg talking for a moment. I've spent the last 2 months listening to Mark's music, and as I've been preparing to portray his today, made the note that 2 days after his passing was the day that I moved to Appleton, Wisconsin, and about a week after is when I started joining and worshiping here. So that's pretty remarkable for me, I feel like. And as I listened to Mark's music and was trying to figure out a song to play that would try to give it some justice, I came to the conclusion that I am not the finger-picking guitarist that Mark is. So instead of playing one of Mark's songs, I have a song that I'd like to dedicate to Mark today. It's called Man You Don't Meet Every Day. Oh, I gotta turn my guitar down first. Hold on. Oh, my name is Mark Pablo. I'm an easygoing man and a roving young fellow I have been. So be easy and free when you're singing with me. I'm a man you don't meet every day. I have acres of land, I have men at command, I have always a shilling to spare. So be easy and free when you're singing with me. I'm a man you don't meet every day. So come fill up your glasses of brandy and wine, and whatever the cost I will pay. So be easy and free when you're singing with me. I'm a man you don't meet every day. So, there we go. So down in the front here, if you're interested in learning more about Mark's life, this beautiful presentation was made by Arden. So thank you, Arden, for doing the hard work so that I didn't have to. But we would like to present that to, yeah, thank you, yes, thank you. We would like to present that to Sandy today to take home with her as a special memory of the time here at Freedom Moravian. So blessings. Thank you.
Good introduction for the what do they call it? The Grim Reaper. I want to thank you all for inviting me today. I'm honored to be here. I've served this congregation for a lot of years through families opening up their lives to me when they lost a loved one. I've created some great friendships along the way. What I remember most, or one of the things I remember most about the Free Moravians church is cooks in the kitchen got the best desserts. So I'm going to explain a little bit about when this church was founded and what funeral service was like then and how it's changed to what it is now. So Mule Betcher Funeral Home in Seymour is one of 3 of the oldest funeral homes in the state of Wisconsin that is still a funeral home. It was formed in 1873 by Philip Mule. He came from the East Coast. He brought 3 cabinet makers and he set up, and I had the funeral home later if you guys want to look up here, was on Main Street in Seymour. This said Philip Mule Furniture and Undertaking. And that used to be a combination, and sometimes people wonder why are the funeral homes and furniture companies or furniture stores put together. It's because back in the day when they weren't making furniture and there were deaths in the community, they made caskets. And so that's how they started up in Seymour, making furniture and caskets. And today, once in a while, we'll talk to people that say, I turned over a piece of furniture that I had in my house. It says B. Mule on it, furniture company. They say, well, that's probably furniture. If it's furniture, it's probably from the 1873 to 1920s or so. So, but in the early, a lot of people don't realize, and some of you might remember, but in the late 1800s and early 1900s, taking care of families was kind of like the doctor coming out to your house to take care of somebody that was sick. The funeral director came out to the house when someone died, usually alerted by the doctor or one of the family members, come out with his horse and carriage. He'd bring along his equipment that he needed. The person that died was usually prepared somewhere in the house or out in a tent next to the house where the preparation was done. And then the body was placed in some comfortable clothing and placed back into the house on a bed called a slumber bed. And there the body would stay until the funeral director would go back. He'd measure the size of the casket. The family would pick out the type of wood they wanted and the type of hardware they wanted on it. And many times would buy burial clothing if it wasn't something that the person had that they wanted the person buried it. Then after that happened, then the funeral director would come out and would dress the body in burial clothing, do the cosmetics and things right out in the house, place the person in the casket, and then in the old time homes, and I'm guessing maybe the Minster home up there probably had a parlor, called it the parlor in the house, and that is where the visitation took place. After the visitation took place, and that was usually 2 nights, then the funeral director would come out with this horse-drawn hearse, and this is the original hearse that was used in this area. It still would exist, and I'll tell the story of it in a minute. And this is Philip Mule right here to the left, but then they would transport the body from the house to the church to the cemetery. Now that horse horse-drawn hearse was in a garage behind the hotel in Seymour until the end of World War II. With the story of World War II today, what happened to that hearse was there were some guys from Seymour that were out hitting the bars and thought they ought to celebrate the end of World War II. So they made dummies of Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini, and they put it in that, they broke into the garage, pulled it out in the middle of Main Street, put the dummies in there, lit it on fire, and had a celebration. And it's funny, last week I was working at the museum, and a person came in that said they were there that night when that happened. So, boy, it was quite the celebration in Seymour. But, so that's what happened to that hearse. Otherwise, I had a pair of horses that would have I could have used that hearse. And actually, in 1990, we had a funeral for somebody that was known, one of the last Lehman cowboys. And he died, and his family said, God, I wish we could take him to the cemetery in a horse-drawn hearse. So I found one in the state of Wisconsin, and we had it shipped here. And then Bill Nolan from Pondwell brought his pair of black Persian horses, and out in St. Lawrence Cemetery, or church in Navarino, we did it the old way of walking behind the hearse to the cemetery, and also had his horse tied to the back of the funeral coach. So we made it special for that family, and it was kind of neat that I could relive the old custom. Also in this picture is, up on the front is when they used to have the visitations in the homes, we didn't have air conditioning. The preparation and embalming isn't like it was today. So you had to set things up in the home so that it was possible for these 2-day celebrations or visitations. So on the top is a net that sat at the end of the casket and then draped all the way over the casket. And the reason for that would be because people coming in and out of the house, and the flies and mosquitoes and all those different things, it kept it off for the respect off the body. Also, when the casket was placed in the house, it was placed on a bier, and the bier was like 2 platforms, one on each side, and then there was a velvet curtain that went around it. And that reason for that is back in the day when it was the middle of the summer, or humidity was high, or these 90-degree days we've had, they would put chests of ice under there also to keep the body cool, so that everything stayed the way it should all the way through the visitation. Later, and this down here is actually a cot. It's a wicker basket. If someone died at that time, a lot of accidents out in the fields, out and farther away on properties, or a carriage would turn over, there'd be a death somewhere, almost like an accident today. Well, that's what they used instead of a cot. They placed the body into the wicker basket, and then that's how people lifted it up and carried the person to make the removal. Again, in the when you went to the cemetery, and I can remember a couple of funerals here where we did walk. Some family members walked behind. Then we had the hearse, but we walked all the way over to the cemetery because that's something that the family was an old tradition that people had. And I could think back when I first started out in funeral service and sitting down with families in Seymour's, where when I would sit down with somebody and they might be 80, 90 years old and their spouse died, and besides losing their loved one, there was something else that was happening in the arrangement conference on how they could cope with why they were in there and what they were doing. And usually almost every time came to, I would sit down with them and I'd say, I know you're having a hard time. I bet you that when your loved one died and you were a child, your mother or father, and the visitation is in the house, your mother or father pulled you up to the casket and made you kiss that body. And every single time, that was what the reason was. And so sometimes they didn't always handle things the right way. We always when I've seen parents bring children, I think it's real important to bring bring children into the funeral. But don't drag them up or let them take their time and do. Then I think it's important for them to view their loved ones. Cemeteries back then, it was real difficult because all the graves were hand dug. So what happened in the winter time is that they would use start these big fires on top of the grave, and then they would get maybe a foot of ground out of the grave when it was. And sometimes in the winter here we'd have 3 to 4 feet of frost. So they would get down a foot, then stoke the fire again, and sometimes it would take them an entire day or day and a night. So usually that meant for the grave diggers, especially in some communities, they would start the grave, go down to the local establishment, play cards, and when they knew that when a foot of ground was thawed out, they could go back and get another foot of ground out. So it was real difficult at that time. And then once, probably in the 30s and stuff, there started to be these shovels and stuff like that modernization came in, and they were able to use equipment to dig graves. There's still some cemeteries today yet that'll only dig the graves by hand. So in the early days, they did not use what we call burial vaults. What they would do is the caskets went right down into the ground. So what happened is as communities grew and these people established cemeteries, if they put the casket down in the ground, and they're made out of wood, they're going to start to rot away. So then years later, when they tried to put maybe the spouse down next to the person, that had rotted away and they were digging into an existing grave. So then they went to wood planks. And so in my father also had the furniture store with Leo Haas, and we had a warehouse where they stored the mattresses. And then in there was wood planks from the late 1870s that were 2-3 inches thick, some 4 inches thick, and that's what they would build burial vaults before concrete vaults were made. And that would keep those graves uniform in the cemetery. You'd never have any problem that you'd ever go into an existing grave. And that's why if you go into old cemeteries, sometimes you'll see where they're caved in like that. That's because everything is pretty much deteriorated in the ground and it's not smooth like the cemetery people want it. And that's the reason for a burial vault. So after the 1870s, 1900s, visitation became popular in funeral homes. And the first funeral home that had and also preparations were then done in the funeral home. And so the first one was down where Edward Jones Mills moved their operation down to where Edward Jones's used to be the first library in Seymour. And that was a funeral home until in the 1930s, where the present funeral home is on Main Street. In the 1930s, everything, and it's been remodeled several times. And again, up until about 1970, visitations in the funeral home were usually 2 nights, and then after about 1970, it went to 1 night. Now today, many funerals are everything in 1 day, and then some people aren't having funerals anymore. So times have changed a little bit on that. I kind of want to put down, because we were talking about a little bit about cemeteries, is I like to say, I used to use this a lot. I had a program that I thought the cemetery was a great place to teach children about death and dying. And I saw just some remarkable things happen at cemeteries. So I thought I'd maybe share a couple of those things with you. One of the purpose of a cemetery to me, it's a storage place for the deceased, for a person that was so important to you. It's a place where you can come back and you can remember. Some people don't need to come back and remember. They can go to a favorite place. Great place to explain to children where their loved ones are and who their loved one was when they were alive. And I used it as, when I had a visitation, I had a program for children where we'd release, especially if a child lost a parent or a brother or sister, we would do a balloon release at the cemetery. It was my way of explaining what happened to the person when they died. And I always had a really, really good response. And to this day, when I might meet somebody 30, 40 years old, look them up to me and say, man, you really helped me understand about death and dying and help me through my brother's death or whatever. But what I use is I'd say, when you release a balloon and you watch it go until you can't see it anymore, well, that's what I believe what happens when a person dies, is that now they're up in heaven, they're with God and watching over you. And it worked great until one time my grandmother died and she had about 30 little grandchildren. And it was a hot day in the summertime. And I called Kylo for, since get me 30 balloons, I'm going to do a balloon release out at the cemetery. And then I remembered I had a couple other calls. I had to call in an obituary, so I called in the obituary. Then I came back, left the balloons in my car, and all 29 of them went up. But the little guy that talked the most held his, and it went down and it hit the ground. And after I gave that explanation, the little guy says, "Oh no." And his dad says, "Well, what happened?" And he goes, "Grandma just went to hell." So then the dad looked at me and said, "Well, explain this one, Kurt." So it was quite the experience. But I always at the cemetery used the cemetery as, again, that it was a storage place for the deceased. It was a remembering place where you can come here when you're as old as I am. Sometimes when some child lost their mom or dad, I would take them up to my father's grave and we'd stand there and I'd say, you know, my dad died 20 years ago. He's not here with me anymore, but he's still telling me what to do. It's just in a different way. And to help them understand that regardless of what your age, you still have, and I tell them I've got every memory I had of my dad at the time, you know. So it was a great place to use that. And also, I'm going to just tell you about some great memories that I had in the cemetery. And one was, we had taken a mother who had lost her 2-year-old daughter. We had taken the family to the grave for the burial after the funeral. She happened to be Native American, and they have a big belief in the eagle. And we had to, she was beyond hysterics. We were carrying her to the grave, and she just couldn't leave the grave. And all at once, up in the clouds was an eagle, and the eagle just, it's a small cemetery, but all that eagle would do is just go around that cemetery. And almost immediately, that mother said, "I know my daughter's fine now." And all the emotions and stuff, I mean, she had a rough time after, but at least she could leave the cemetery. Her daughter was alone. And I also had that with some children that lost their dad at a very young age. So I got the balloons and we did it out at the cemetery. And they were having a difficult time when we released the balloons. An eagle started flying through the balloons. And I explained to the kids about what that meant to that mother. And just almost immediately there was this calm with these kids. It was just an amazing thing to experience. And I've had a lot of those in my life. And then I've also seen where families that had a lot of friction in their family. There was a brother and sister who couldn't stand themselves. Couldn't stand each other, excuse me. And the visitation at the funeral, I thought, well, this, maybe it'll smooth over the relationship a little bit. It didn't. And then at the cemetery, when we were lowering the casket down into the grave, the brother and sister came together, hugged each other, and they were close until each other, or one or the other passed. And they said it was something their mother always wished would have happened when they were alive. And I actually got to see it at the cemetery, and it was a really good experience. And then to leave on a kind of a funny note, if you wonder what a funny story, what happened in the cemetery. In one of the rural cemeteries, we were having a funeral, and after we were going to walk to the cemetery, and all once the vault the guy setting up the vault said, hey, we can't have this burial after this service. And they were going to do, we were going to do that and then come back to, they were having a funeral luncheon. There's 2 skunks down in the grave. So the minister was up preaching, and then we were going to go directly out to the cemetery. So my dad wrote a note to him, and he was one that, when he was up there, he was always looking down. My dad just slipped it in front of him while he was giving the sermon, say we can't go out to the cemetery. And so as he was reading that, he looks like that, and he looks up, really, Norm? He goes. And so we put, the vault guy put 2 planks down into the grave, and it took the skunks 2.5 hours till they climbed out of there. And then we went out and had the burial. So I really believe that today some things that we're missing is not going out to the cemetery. Cemetery, we do many times people think it's easier. Many times later, after the funeral's all over, they have to deal with the whole closure thing because they didn't take that final step. But there is a very important part, your cemetery here. Like I said, there's a lot of history. Just listening to this today, it's just great to know what, all the stories of all the people that came through this church or this community. And we always say if we would have only been able to record some of these, actually record these stories and these things are treasures that you have these letters. So I thank you for coming out. If there's any questions, feel free to ask me. If you want to look at the pictures, I'll leave them up here for a little bit. And want to thank you for inviting me because this is a warm-up because Emmanuel and Seymour's having theirs in September. So if they like the program, maybe they'll ask me to do the same thing. I want to come up with something else. So thank you.
And thank you all for coming and joining us for this wonderful opportunity to celebrate the lives of this congregation and the many who have come and gone. I want to just give a couple of quick notes before we head out today. First, it is 46 days until the Freedom Moravian Chili Supper on October 8th, so mark your calendars. The countdown is beginning as we're feeling this slightly cooler summer breeze. Also, in the sanctuary, there is some leftover meals from our dinner this afternoon. If you would like to take a meal home with you, there's for purchase in there. They're all marked the different options and things, so feel free to stop in and take some things home with you so that we're not left over with too much here. I want to just give another big thank you to everyone on the 160th team that helped put it together. Myself, Deb and Jim Bernetsky, Norm Bloom, Rob and Jeannie Spritzter, Terry Carpenter, Jane and Bruce Eckert, and of course Sherry Knockway helping make it all possible today. And as we go from our space, we're going to close with a prayer for our church for today and for the many years to come. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you in gratitude as we celebrate the 160th anniversary of the Freedom Moravian Church. We give thanks for sustaining us through every season and for sending us faithful leaders and generations of members who have built this church. We treasure the memories of those who have gone before us and those who laid the foundation upon which we continue to grow. Continue to guide us, inspire us, and empower us. Deepen our unity and strengthen our commitment to one another. We dedicate the coming years into your hands as you guide our vision so that our deeds bring honor and glory to your name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Blessings to you all, and again, thank you all for coming.
Did you ever draw beer?
I bet you can.
I bet I can.
Girls up, you're cleaning it up. I gotta come say hi to you, Amy. Yes. Do you? I can see you. Hi, Terry. Yeah, right. I want to. Yeah. What's your name? Okay. Me too. This is no, I have to drink it. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I know my sister and I didn't have the same one. So Sarah, she was a year older than me. Yeah. Yeah. Because I know some, like, we both had Miss Mall for first and for fifth. Okay. But I think the second, third, and fourth. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.